Hey guys, and welcome back to She Gets It Done. Today we have Anastasia back, and we're going to be talking about using food in dog training. Obviously, using food is super popular these days. Almost, I think, leading to a point that now dogs don't do stuff without food anymore. And Anastasia and I had a good conversation a while back privately, where she is saying that she uses a lot less food for dogs, or sometimes no food at all. And I thought that would be a great conversation to have today. So welcome.
Hello again.
Hello. Welcome back.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like it used to be that for training dogs you needed like leash and a collar, and now it's like, well, you need treats, and this is like the first thing that you need,
Mm.
and sometimes it's the only thing, seems like. But yeah, I think we had a really good conversation about it. And also the other thing is like, what do you do if you have a dog that is not food motivated or either too excited to take food or is too afraid to take food, sort of
Yeah.
like overstimulated in one way or another. And yeah, I mean, the back story of using food is obviously when we sort of switched from training dogs with just negative reinforcement, which is removing pressure. The positive only movement came in and brought in food for rewarding good behaviors, right? And you can use positive and negative reinforcement to teach new behaviors. There's sort of food is the positive reinforcement is what brings in the motivation a lot of the time, but it's not. I wouldn't say that it's a necessity, perhaps.
So
Um,
you would you say that using food isn't always necessary to teach a new behavior?
I would say so, yeah. I've had dogs where we were not able to use food for teaching a new behavior, and you're not gonna get a flashy, like preppy kind of, sport type of behavior.
Yep.
But you are going to be able to teach um, a new behavior with just negative reinforcement through pressure and release. And in fact, depending on what type of behavior you're teaching, it might make sense. For example, I don't really use food in behaviors where I don't need the dog to be super excited about the task that they're doing, a place, or loose leash walking. I think that you're teaching loose leash walking in a similar way where, yeah, I mean, there is sometimes food involved for like focus on me or something that is more or less an addition to the loose leash itself, but I don't need the dog to be more excited than it already is when I'm teaching them loose leash. And same with place for me. But I've also had dogs that were, either too fearful to be really motivated by food and lured into position, or they were too focused on something else to really be able overly excited to be able to again be lured into a position. And then you can either say, well, I can't teach this dog anything because it's not going to take food, or you can go to negative pressure and teach it that way.
So we're basically categorizing for people listening dogs that don't take food, dogs that where the food makes them unable to think, they get so
Hmm.
excited they just become silly, right?
Yeah.
And then there is the activities where food shouldn't be the main motivator because the
Right.
work itself is the main motivator, right? That's kind of where we're at to make it a little bit more dog owner friendly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Exactly.
would you say though, how would you say that you don't go into too much compulsion? Because I know this is the first question people will have. They're like, "Oh, but isn't that now compulsion only training?" Does that make sense?
Right. So, I think you have to be realistic about. So sort of like the cliff note that I gave with you're not gonna get a flashy behavior. You have to be realistic about that. I'm not gonna ask a dog if it's a, like let's say I'm working with a dog that is learning place and I'm not using food. I'm just using leash pressure and my markers for like marking the moment that they get on that. I remove the pressure, so I mark the action of getting on the place board with
Yeah.
good. My good doesn't really have food attached to it, so it's just kind of like a marker for them to know that they did the right thing. But when I train in that way, I'm not going to ask a dog to like run to that place and be extremely fast about it. I'm not going to be applying pressure to the point that the dog is trying to avoid it, I would say. Right? So we're not talking about like extreme leash pops, or we're not immediately going to like, training collars. It is gentle pressure. If you think about training horses, a lot of pressure used there is also quite gentle, is just insistent. And it doesn't turn off until the dog completes the thing that you're asking them to do, right? Like, yeah, so it is, I guess it depends on your definition of compulsion, because you are using pressure when you're just teaching with negative reinforcement, right? And you can use praise and you can use your conditioned markers that sort of release some dopamine in the dog. But I think it's important to understand that you're also not necessarily working on a sport performance. So you're not gonna continue to apply pressure until the dog is like, the second that you say place, I'm gonna just run there because I don't want to experience what's gonna happen next. That's not the goal. The goal is you say place and the dog is calmly is like, yep, I'm gonna, but I'm not stressed about it. I just know that you will put me on place
If
after
I
you say,
don't listen. Yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
So what is your choice with a dog that is like that maybe doesn't take food or they get too excited? But what about the normal dog? Would you still choose to not use food with some of those dogs? They're not overly excited, they are food motivated, or would you still opt for verbal praise or giving a pat? Because I'm assuming that you still do that when you don't use food.
Yes, yeah, I use praise quite a bit
Yeah.
with dogs that enjoy pets. Then you can also use physical affection, obviously, but I guess it depends on the behavior. Like I said, for loose leash walking and for place, I don't need for stay behavior, like down stay, sit stay, I don't need the dog to be motivated. So I'm not going to be using food, even if they are food motivated, most of the time. It is also like idea that we have to pay dogs for every single rep, I think is valid if we're doing hundreds of reps. So if I have a training session where I'm going to be asking that dog to, let's say, sit, then go into and down, then sit again, then go into and down. I don't know why I would do that with a pet dog, but let's say for whatever reason. I will probably be using food because I don't want to have a dog that is flat. I'm not, I want to pay them for doing a lot of things in quick succession so that they have that motivation to be engaged in training, right? But if I'm just doing 5 reps of this or that, even if it is a dog that is maybe food motivated, I don't necessarily feel like it's unfair to not be paying them for 5 things that they did.
I think that's a very important point because this is kind of like I definitely use more food than you, but that does lead me into the problem with clients of overfeeding, poor effort, feeding whatever the dog does, even though it didn't do what you wanted them to do, and only listening when I have food in my hands. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like those are side effects of using food that are rarely discussed or remedied by a lot of trainers, right? Because at
Right.
some stage, I feel like we shouldn't have to pay every single rep. we should want to make the dog work for 10 reps and you get the same payment, right? That's kind of my point of view when I use food. But realistically, people don't do that. Or you have someone that goes sit, 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 and the dog finally sits at number
Mhm.
5, and then they
Yeah.
feed the dog. And I'm like, why'd you feed him? That was shit. Don't reward shit effort,
Right.
right? And I think we need a lot more, we need a little bit more of the let's not use food for everything back into the food world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, like because you kind of create this also, it's one of the most frequent things really that I hear from new clients that he does it or she does it when I have food. And usually it's also prefaced, but we're also in the living room. We're indoor, there's not a lot of distractions. And then my dog is behaving
Mm,
exactly the way that I want them to. They're really focused on me. And as soon as we leave the apartment or as soon as I don't have that treat in my hand, everything just kind of falls apart. And that's how I know. I love hearing that from clients because I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a dog that like we've never applied pressure to and we just never did training with pressure and release. So there's no consistency. The dog is kind of like it's a magic trick. I do it when I want to. There's no
mm,
way for you to hold me accountable to the behavior that you have quote unquote taught me. I don't consider a behavior to be learned until I can, I'm going to use that word, compel the dog to do it. By compel, I don't mean like force them into the behavior. I have a way of making that behavior happen in the moment when I need that behavior, which is usually going to be one or other way of pressure, right? So it is spatial pressure, it is leash
pressure.
pressure, it is
Yep.
e-collar pressure. Some like if I have a dog that is for whatever reason deciding that I'm not doing that because I'd rather do something else. I want to have that ability to make the
To
behavior
tell them
happen.
that, hey, if you don't
Yeah,
want to
like
do it,
it's
this
not
is how we are
optional.
going to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the stuff that happens a lot, I think, in like puppy classes, and it's great to use food with puppies. We love it. If you can use their kibble, that is even better. Don't use treats, use their food, make them work for that food, make them realize that the most important thing in their life is coming from you. That builds the relationship. It also allows you to get a shit ton of those reps
Mm,
back to back. And most puppies, even the more sort of like picky breeds, like the Chihuahuas and Shih Tzus
poodle.
and whatever, when they are puppies, because they are growing, they're still food motivated enough to actually be able to use that kibble or whatever it is that they're fed as means of paying.
Yeah.
Um, so like with puppies, love food, great. Don't get caught up on the treats. I'd rather you use kibble, but or whatever is their main food.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about like, okay, so you're like 4 months or 5 months, and I would rather at that point pick a few behaviors where I'm gonna start to overlay that pressure and have an ability to make the behavior happen. Have a dog that consistently sits no matter what is happening around, because that is a way to teach focus to them. Like, hey, no matter what, you have to focus on me because you will have to do what I told you to do. And maybe it's just this one thing, which is sit, but it doesn't matter what environment we're in. Maybe we're on subway, maybe we're on slippery floor, maybe you're at the vet's office, you're on the observation table, maybe you're at the park and there's a bunch of kids. Sit means sit. You gotta sit. And I do find that like it kind of focuses the dog more on handler. It's almost like teaching them learning, like active hearing, where in situations where you used to have a dog that is like completely just tuned out and sort of is running around like a chicken with a head cut off, got a dog that is like, oh shit, sometimes you say something and I actually have to do it. So I well, like 10% of my hearing is going to be connected to you at all times because I don't want to miss that cue. And so that's kind of like how I usually start with one thing and then we add on another thing. And then, by the time that they're like 6 months, 6 to 7, um, most of the puppies that are raised in my program or in my care, we're not using food anymore. We're just using relationship for praise, or we will use pressure if we need to make that behavior happen in the moment. But it is important to have that moment sort of like of overlapping the pressure and the rewards, because I think that's the part that a lot of like kind of group classes skip, at least in our area, right? Like where all of the behaviors are taught just as a magic trick. We're only using food, and then the pressure never happens. And then you get,
I mean, I do that. If I look at my own group classes, I don't really use pressure in my group classes. And
Mhm.
if you ask me, good question, why? I don't know. I think it's a part of that, it's uncomfortable to do that in public because people don't like using pressure they with their dogs so
We
much.
are talking about leash pressure though.
Sure, I use
Uh,
leash pressure for sure.
yeah, yeah.
But even like as simple as a place command, if you want your dog to lie down, we can use leash pressure for that,
Hmm.
right? By stepping on the lead. Well, I teach sit on the dog, but I don't
Hmm.
say to people with a dog that's struggling, just step on the lead and wait till they lie down. In a group setting, that
Hmm.
just isn't the right place to do that.
I think it depends. It definitely, the public's perception, I think like everybody has probably seen it at some point in their life. The picture of person is stepping on a leash and you get a dog that is suddenly a giraffe and
Oh,
is can't bend my front legs. It's impossible.
yeah.
Oftentimes, those are scenarios where I will actually lure the dog into just to like make the thing happen faster. I can use food to lure the dog into the position and then just end that struggle in the moment, right? Which I think probably for group classes is a better thing because I personally don't have, what if it takes you 5 minutes, right? I don't have the 5 minutes in a group
The
class
whole
to like,
pressure.
I need the dog to be in the position. So I think for that, it is valid to use two reinforcers for moments when they are struggling,
Mm.
right? Again, if it is actually a dog that is focused enough to accept food and be lured with food. Because a dog that is stressed out, if it's a dog that is super hyper about other dogs being in the class, you're not going to get success with trying to lure them into that down while also applying leash pressure. You're really only going to get success with leash pressure, mostly
Yeah, I agree.
in those cases. So I think like it is it's just something that isn't really discussed, I guess, with owners these days, especially in group classes. I don't know many group classes in my neighborhood slash my city where we teach people how to use pressure in a mindful and careful and calculated way. And I guess,
It is hard when you have 8 to 10 people in class and you have 50.
yeah, yeah,
And it's a sensitive subject, right? Because we don't want people to misunderstand and go the other way, where it's like, whoa, bro, you need to calm down a little bit.
in public, and that it can be, people can also sway the opposite way where they use too much.
Exactly.
Which I think is another valid point about like, it, people don't know how to use it in controlled manner. So when they do end up using it, a lot of the time it's frustrated pressure. I'm gonna make you sit no matter fucking what.
Yeah.
And it really should not be that way. It should be a language that the dog understands.
Yeah.
The difference between language of food and language of pressure is that one is just more bulletproof because you're not relying on dog's motivation to eat in the moment. You're not relying on them being hungry. So I think I've had a few clients over the years where I had to teach them how to not be too
Rough.
hard with the pressure that they use. And it does usually come down to emotional regulation of the person and the person realizing that it's not a quick fix by any means.
Mm.
Um, it's just a more, it's your safety belt, if that makes sense. It is actually something that will ensure that the dog is able to do the behavior in any sort of distraction, no matter what happens around.
Yeah,
But it's not a, you still have to practice it enough. It's not going to be that we use a leash pressure on the dog one time and then you go
and it's done.
to a
Yeah,
completely new area, you say sit, and then when they don't, you're like, well, now I'm gonna
for
end
sure.
up on new because I'm being too hard on my dog. That's not what happens. You can't do that. That's not training. That's insane.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's good to make it. I like how you said that you start with puppies with food and then you move to pressure to kind of wean them off the food and to say
Hmm.
it's like your backup method, right? Well, if you don't want to eat food, I still need to be able to do this. And I guess when you get a client that has an older dog, like a 9 month old or a 1.5 year old, to me personally, if the dog takes food, I would still start on food and then try and get them off that as quickly as I know that they know what I want from them. I just don't see personally why I would start with pressure. If I can easily teach a dog sit with a lure, why wouldn't I do that? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And I think in some scenarios it does make sense to go that way, especially if you're working, if you're like a new person that is working with a dog and dog has no relationship with you
Mm.
at all, if you just come in and you start applying pressure. But I think in situations where I'm not going to have owners use much food in sessions with a dog that they own, if it's an older dog, because they've used food.
And it
They've paid
didn't
that.
work.
We're
Yeah.
actually gonna, yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah.
We're actually good. Like I'm the person that comes in and is like, hey, just so you know, like we have some sort of relationship with you, dog. So take my guidance. And for that, I need to have either play or like something happening with food where the dog is like, oh, you are also be fun, right? Like, but the owners, most of the time, I do not have them paying dog for much with food, but I try to also sort of like mitigate the for all mentality. So like I know that people will still want to give treats to their dogs, and I know that they will still want to like with their picky dogs, cook them eggs and put it on top of their bowl. So I try to troubleshoot that before instead of like completely cutting off, don't give your dog any treats. I do just give them rules of like, hey, so they have to do something first for you, and you have to just ask for it one time and then you can pay them. The free for all mentality with giving out treats for, simple stuff like sit for 2 seconds doesn't really lend to great relationship in my experience.
Yeah, I'll jump into that for a second because we had this conversation about the sit that one of your mentors or someone you learned from said that becomes part of your job description. Is that what you said? Or did I make it myself that way? We had a whole conversation about it that when you have food, eventually sit isn't a particular skill anymore to your dog. That just becomes
Yes,
part of the
yes,
job description. Like I shouldn't
yes.
have to reward you if this is
Mhm.
something that is so freaking basic. Why do I need to
Yeah.
give you food for that?
Yeah. So for me, obedience is not, it's not optional and it's not also difficult.
Mm,
I I use a lot of food in behavioral cases because we have a dog that needs to change habits and I want to reward better choices. But in situations where we're just teaching dog a recall or we're just teaching dog a place command when guests come over or whatever it is, right? Like sit, stay, down, stay,
mm,
doesn't matter. I do in the end want it to be just part of the job description. Like it is your task
Yeah.
dog to be doing those things, not that it's
Special
an
stuff.
additional, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like this additional project that you do once a year, you know? And that's again where we come back into if you go on a walk, you might tell your dog to heel or sit or stay, I don't know, 5 times. That's not sufficient amount of work for an adult dog to be making a big fuss of it.
Yeah.
If if you go on a training walk and I'm gonna ask my dog to sit 50 times on different surfaces that half of which she hates, I'm not talking about my specific dog right now, but like just for example, if I'm like, no, today we're just gonna find all kinds of weird objects and you're just gonna sit on them. I'm gonna be paying that dog because at that point she is working.
Yeah.
But if it's just like I'm at a coffee shop and I'm grabbing coffee and I need you to sit because there's a line and you need to take up as much or as little space as possible, like I'm not going to be paying you. I'm not going to be asking the coffee shop if they have a treat so that I can give it to you. That's insane. That's just crazy to me. Like and I like the distinction of like if it's happening inside of your apartment, most of the time I don't have to pay you. You know, like because the environment is just so low, unless it's a situation again, unless it's a behavioral case, or unless it's a completely
Add up training exercise.
kind
Yeah.
of yeah, some sort of like training exercise where we're doing a lot of back-to-back reps, or it's a genuinely tough task for a dog. So like dog that is struggling with particularly not barking, at the front door
Mm.
while on place.
Yeah.
If they are silent on that place, I might opt out to pay them while they are silent. But if it's just an in-home training session, chances are we don't really need, or like not an in-home training session, but it's just like your day-to-day
Yeah,
life.
that's it. If I'm
We
just
don't
training my
need,
dogs in the house for a few reps, then they
yeah,
get maybe one reward for every 10 reps. If it's stuff that we've done like a million times. But if I try
yeah,
something completely new, or I don't know, let's say you're doing a leave it and you have your dog recall past certain food, because they're working on impulse control.
yeah, a
Going to
more,
reward that.
yeah. Something that is requiring sort of like extra performance and extra focus on part of the dog. But so I just like recently I get a lot of cases where the dog is so excited and so overstimulated by the environment that they will just not take food.
Yep.
And usually it will take about 3 days for them to realize that food will only come when outside. So in those situations, I'll just use the most recent example. I had a young sporting breed dog, 1 year old, over for board and train, and he would spit food out. So he would just spit it out. He did not care about it because the environment was more exciting and more interesting to him. And it's a dog that is used to eating from a bowl. It's a dog that has food drive because he's still growing, but he's not used to working for it. Took him about 3 days to realize that food is only coming when you're working. Like that's your opportunity to earn it, basically, because I'm not using treats. I'm using your kibble. And then it took him about a week to realize that it's only coming when you're outside. I'm not going to offer it to you inside
Yeah.
because in that scenario, you're muted. Yeah. In that scenario, I'm actually using food as a like
I use it as existential food.
existential food is one thing, yes, but I'm also using it as a means to sort of like bring that arousal down
Mm.
in case of this specific dog. Because to him, retrieving was, or going and exploring was the highest reward. And in presence of that potential reward, he would not take a lower value reward, which was food.
Right.
So I'm bringing his arousal down actually by having him sort of like forcing him a bit, right, over the span of that week to realize there are more important things actually than retrieving and sniffing and marking everything. And those are more important things are eating. And so now I have to be a bit calmer when I'm outside so that I can actually eat because it is an interesting process that happens like when you're trying to get a dog to take a lower reinforcer in presence of a higher reinforcer. You have to teach them that it's again not optional. You have to take that reinforcer, right? Like this is something that happens quite a bit in sport training, where you go to a highly stimulating environment with a dog, and that dog would rather chase ducks or would rather go on agility course or they would rather bite a decoy than take food from you because you're boring and you can offer them food at home and they maybe get it from a bowl and they don't care. And you're like, yeah, that's all great, but I still need you to take it because I need to get all of those 50 reps of whatever it is that the thing that you have. Like you, I did not have ability to reward you every time with the gold. You know, you have to take silver. I'm sorry. That's the what's going to happen. And so in that scenario, you're actually working on the dog dropping that arousal low enough to where they're like, okay, fine, nothing better is coming my way. So I might as well take your stupid food.
Yeah.
And then you're just like kind of starting to, okay, great. Now let's go back to that high arousal activity and then see how long it takes you to calm down enough to take that food. And so it's kind of like this like step ladder, if you will, of
Mm.
reinforcements with dogs that are super excited, where at first in those training stages, you can't use food because they will not take it.
Mm.
If you go outside, they will spit it out.
Yeah. Or they
Like
just don't take it at all.
or they just, yeah, you put it in front of them and they ignore it. And it can be their food, it can be treats, it can be anything. I will just continuously, with a dog like that, I will continuously offer it, but it's the only way that it's going to come. That's the thing that's going to happen with them for a while until they realize, oh, I have to switch my focus.
Yeah.
First of all, not only am I not getting reinforced with that ball or that, I don't know, whatever saying hi to a person, saying hi to a dog that they love that lives on their block. Not only am I not getting that, but I'm also not getting the crusty old food that I turn my nose up in any other scenario, but the presence of that highly exciting thing. So this is my opportunity to eat. And you're kind of just working on at that point, lowering the arousal and having a dog that is more coachable and is actually more interesting. But how the hell am I going to work that dog in the meantime
Mm.
if I was not using pressure?
True.
Am I just going, right? Like, am I just going outside and I'm just letting the dog run around and do whatever the hell they want? No.
Yeah.
Am I going outside and having that dog do extremely difficult stuff? Also, no. I have to start with super basic things like the loose leash that are actually pretty difficult for this dog, but that I also don't have to use the food for, right? Because that's not how I teach it. And I will continuously just do it and do it and do it and do it until I get a dog that is tuned in more into me than it is into the environment, right? Like with that sporting dog, the downstay session that we had, I'm pretty sure I put him back into that downstate about 50 times. And on the 51st, he just was like, okay, fine. I'll stay here for longer than 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Sure. And after that, we started making progress.
The
And
battle
it's
of
also
wills with a dog like that, isn't it?
right. And like if I were to, either wait until he's hungry enough to think about only food, I mean, that would probably take a week. If I were to say, well, sorry, I can't train him actually because he's not taking food, that would be waste of owner's money and honestly waste of my time also because at that point I have an uncontrollable dog and care that is no fun to be around.
Mm.
So it's kind of just, like
So simply, if we kind of summarize it in easy words for people, if you have a dog that when the moment you take it outside, it's checked out, it's so busy wanting to do whatever they want, the dog doesn't take food. This is when you say, you know what? Now the only time you get food is when we go outside. Inside the house, you don't get food from me anymore. So I become more
Mhm.
interesting. And in the meantime, until you take that food from me, I am going to use the leash or body pressure or whatever it is to make you do what I want you to do. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, say so. And you usually start with something that is easy enough where you know that like in a calmer environment, the dog.
Yeah, yeah. Don't go do this at like the middle of the dog park.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't be
Like
dicking them.
you start on your block or whatever. But yeah, if you have a dog that doesn't take food, it doesn't mean that the training stops. It just means that you're gonna have to use pressure without food for some time
Yeah,
until your dog is no longer so excited and so overstimulated that they are tuning that food out. If it is your goal to be using food at all,
yeah, because
with
that's where I wanted to go to next. Why do all that work to get the dog to take the food if you were using the
For
pressure anyway?
me, if it is a dog that is highly aroused, it's literally about just switching them to a lower arousal where they will take food. So for dogs like that, I'm like, you're not taking food because you're too fixated on the environment. I want to fix the fixation on the environment. And for me, the what's the word? Like the indicator that I achieved that goal is going to be you are taking food reliably with good eye contact, usually.
Right.
And I will pay for eye contact, and that's kind of like I don't pay for sits, I don't pay for downs with dogs like that. I pay for eye contact.
Yeah.
So
Acknowledging.
yeah. And so for me, sort of like it's more about not that I want the dog to take food outside. I personally don't care. I can continue feeding them from the bowl. But it's a good indicator that they are no longer fixated on the environment to the point where they tune out
Everything else.
presence of yeah, something that
Mm.
normally they would take. Like if you get a dog that turns up their nose at food inside as well as they do outside, we have a different problem,
Mm.
right? Like they are not only doing this behavior when they are outside. They an issue with working for food in general.
Yeah.
Like they don't motivated by it. But if you have a dog that is like, oh, they're taking food inside their kibble, they're taking food maybe even outside on our street, whatever. But then we go to a class and they're so stimulated by other dogs being around that they stop taking food. Now, again, for me, the goal is not to have a dog that takes food. It's to have a dog that is not stimulated by
Able
that,
to.
to where they will actually, like taking food is more of a afterthought. Like it's just a
Mm.
thing that happens when the arousal drops because you basically level out those,
Fight or flight.
yeah, like those distractions. It's like it doesn't matter if you're in the living room, outside, or in the group class. Your dog reliably is like at the same-ish level of arousal. And that is what is really important in the end, because I also don't want to be carrying that food around the whole life of my dog, right? That's not really how I want to live my life. But yeah, I think it's a bit more straightforward with dogs that are over aroused, and that's why they're not taking food, than it is with dogs that are afraid and are not taking food because of that.
Yeah.
If you have a dog that is fearful and is not taking food because of that, your only solution is pressure as well, but it is something that has to be done under supervision of a professional because this
I
is
was gonna
not,
say that as well. That's professional job. Like to me, it comes quite naturally working with those fearful dogs because you're constantly tiptoeing that line of I'm gonna push you into something I know you find uncomfortable, and then we're gonna get out of it. And every
yes.
time you get a little bit better, and I'll
Yeah.
try food time and time again to make the situation better, and eventually it clicks, right? But I feel like, especially with fearful dogs, don't go playing around with that yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. If you have like a, young short-haired pointer or you have a young German Shepherd, young lab that is like, screw you, I sit in the living room and then we go outside and I forget what
You
all
see.
of that means. And I don't care about your food. You can shove it.
Yeah.
I don't care. If you have that type of behavior on your hands, use pressure.
Yes.
Like, don't forget about food for a few weeks. Be like, listen, buddy, you're going to be working for something else. You're going to be working to turn off that pressure. Watch a few of, I'm sure you have some YouTube videos on like leash pressure for sit, leash pressure for place, leash pressure for down, stuff like that. Just work your dog through not using food and just using pressure for like
Yeah,
two
because
weeks.
that's what it sometimes comes to, right? It's like your dog is literally giving you the middle finger about food. It's like, fuck it, I don't want to do it. So
Yeah,
are you then just going to say, okay, I guess we're not doing it? Or do you have a method to make your dog do it? And
right.
that's where the pressure comes in.
Yeah. So like I love seeing the change in dogs after about like 2 weeks of owners that are like, again, you can continue to offer food. There's a good chance that for the first week the dog is not going to be taking it, but you have to continuously and consistently use that pressure and release or your obedience so that the relationship flips a little bit. And the dog is like, sit is no longer just a trick that I perform. Sit is actually required as a part of a job description of being a dog. When you say sit, I gotta sit. Unfortunately, even if it's a wet surface, unfortunately, even if it's at the vet office, unfortunately, even if you really want to go off leash
Yeah,
and the owner is like, no, before I clip the leash off, I need you to sit. I mean, that's the like, I'm sure that people that have kids also don't buy a gift for their kid for every single completed homework.
that's it. I've been
If
saying,
it's like a,
yeah,
like it's just insane that there are people that are trying to do that or that are saying that we should be doing that with
yeah. And ever
dogs.
since we've had that conversation, I've been saying the same type of analogy to clients. And like, look, when you are working and you send an email, your manager or your boss isn't going to stand behind you every time telling you how good of a job you're doing. It's like, okay, I hit send. That's part of
Yeah,
my job description to answer emails. That doesn't get me a reward. But
yeah,
maybe if I pull in a really cool project that's gonna make a lot of money or whatever, I get an award for doing something cool at work
yeah.
that
You get a bonus,
that
right? Like you get something
gets you
like that.
something.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
But your
yeah,
basic everyday tasks, well, if you don't do them, there's consequences for not doing your work at
yeah,
work.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it is that's why I think like we have to also teach people how to use that pressure in a mindful way where they don't go overboard, but they are also not falling into the trap of my dog is trained when it wants to, basically.
Except when.
Yeah,
The
but
whole list of
that then
exceptions.
life happens and they forget everything that I taught them to. And you're like, I mean, yeah, no shit. Like, why I would also forget everything. If you just paid me with food for doing magic tricks,
Yeah.
I would also sometimes decide that I didn't want to do those magic tricks.
Especially
But
if you
I
feed me
don't
that
forget.
food, even if I don't do the magic trick, I
Yeah,
still.
and that sometimes also, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's one of the downsides of using food is that higher sort of like you're adding another thing that you're gonna have to wean off, right? So if you have a dog that is used to getting paid every single time that they do something, and sometimes even when they don't do something, you're gonna probably have some moments where that dog is like, well, what do I get for it though?
Is
Like I'll do it.
is this worth my time? What's in
Yeah,
it
is
for
it?
me?
Yeah. Or you get people that are so used to always reaching for that treat pouch and rewarding dog for doing nothing. And then you have to teach them not to do that. But it also does have,
No,
the
it is important to cover that more. And the conversations that we have had have already led to me changing things in my group classes to be more mindful of it and to more aware of like, look, I do need to put more work in weaning these people off of using treats
Of
for their
yeah,
dogs
yeah,
nonstop. And
yeah,
I mean, it's so natural to me to say in a group class, make sure you do everything on lead. Don't train your dog without a lead on. And then still, even in the group class itself, people will drop the lead. They're like, oh, I'll just use it. I'm like, pick up the lead because your dog just didn't do it. So walk him over to the place bed and make him do it. Right.
yeah.
And it's even something simple as that. And I feel like in the current day and age of balance training versus force-free training, reward-based training with food is like the holy fucking grail, which I don't want to deny. Yes, food does do amazing things, but we have kind of slipped into the now where now people are stuck using food and having super unreliable behavior and we don't know how to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think I can understand for puppy classes, like only using food and not really going into pressure much.
Mm.
I think like private sessions with puppies, you sort of have to go into it
Yeah.
sooner or later because there are going to be things to be covered with
Mm.
pressure for, I don't know, even going in a crate. Like one of the most basic things you can either have a dog that is like, I don't want to go in a crate because the treat that you threw into it is not good enough. And you get people that are like trying to catch their dogs and
Mm.
shove them in the crate. Or you can teach that dog leash pressure and how to turn it off when they go in the crate. And then you get a dog that is like, yep, got it. It's not, again, no longer optional, even if I'm 3 months old.
Yes.
But for teenage sort of classes, like this from like, I don't know, 5 months old or sort of like the advanced manners and stuff like that, it is wild to me if pressure isn't part of the training and people leave not knowing how to get reliable results in sort of like any scenario that the dog is put in. Because again, the other thing is also, let's say that you go to your aunt's house and you tell your dog to sit and they're like, yeah, we worked on the pressure and everything and I still, this is a new environment for me
Mm.
and no, I just didn't hear you. You can use that leash and you can achieve that sit while you're, I don't know, unloading your car or whatever it is. And that is also a training experience for your dog. And next time you ask them to sit in the same environment, they are much more likely to just plant their butt down versus having a situation where you go to a new environment, you've been through training classes, but you're getting out of your car, you tell your dog to sit, and your dog is like,
Fuck it.
you don't have food on you.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have food, I don't want it. Or you have food and leash, but nobody told you how to use that leash.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
true. It's
So,
it's a good conversation. I think it's good for other dog trainers to listen to as well and dog owners. Even though it might have been a little bit more technical than usual. Because it's a conversation I feel like needs to be had more and we're shying away from because, well, it's not society doesn't like it when we don't use food anymore.
yeah, I think the other thing is also that it the industry of feeding dogs is like a
It is
multi-billion
business,
thing.
absolutely.
So it also get like genuinely sometimes people spend more food on or more money food for their dogs than
Training,
perhaps what we've spent like 10 years ago in a whole year.
for sure.
Uh, so I think there's also sort of that aspect of like we need to feed dogs like humans and just more focus on
People like to buy shit for their dog,
yeah.
and it makes them feel good, makes the dog feel good, and it makes everyone feel good. And so we don't really want to touch the that doesn't feel that good. So we're okay with, it's good enough. I think that
Yeah,
happens a lot.
that's yeah. I think the bottom line of it all is that good enough in this scenario is
Not good.
dog that they sit
Yeah.
in any distraction.
Yeah. We need
Or
to
you have
change
ways
what
of
good
getting,
enough means.
yeah,
Because
good enough.
for us, it's very different. For an owner, it might be like, well, I ask it 3 times and then he said, good enough.
Yeah.
Whereas we're like, that's not good enough, and I think that's where, I mean, some people don't give it that, honestly, some don't care if their dog doesn't sit when they ask for a sit. And if that's you, then cool. Live your life with your dog how you want it. But if you're having issues with your dog doesn't even take you seriously when you give a basic sit command inside the house or a place command, and they only do it when you have food or whatever, then how are they going to take you seriously outside when it matters, right?
Yeah.
There's also that, in my opinion. All
Yeah.
right, I think that was almost an hour. I feel like we can probably keep talking about this, but we gotta make a end of it because I have to go to work soon. And you can start your evening. Good old time difference. Um,
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on again. She gets it done. Really appreciate it. Very enlightening conversation, and I'm sure we'll have you back again at some point.
Bye bye, guys.
Yeah.